This is Hard Questions with Carl Abel. This is not a platform for talking points, safe opinions, or political theater. This is where ideas get stress tested, no scripts, no protection, no easy outs. If an argument holds up, it earns it. If it doesn't, you'll see exactly why. Let's get started. Today's conversation is about something that almost everyone agrees is broken, but very few agree on how to fix: money in politics. Our guest, Tom Joseph, is the founder of the Main Street Party and the architect of a proposed no money nomination system designed to fundamentally change how candidates are selected in the United States. His model attempts to remove traditional fundraising from the early stages of elections, replacing it with a multi-round voter-driven process supported by a centralized funding mechanism. It's an ambitious idea. It challenges the role of donors, parties, and even voters themselves. But the question that we're asking today is simple. Does this actually fix the problem, or does it just move the problem somewhere else? Tom, welcome to Hard Questions.
Carl, thanks so much for having me on your show. I really appreciate the opportunity to be challenged on the idea.
I'm glad to have you here. Walk me through the moment that you decided the system itself was the problem, not just the candidates.
That's a great question. I don't know if I've been asked that before. There is a pivotal moment back when I actually thought about running for somebody had to resign in my district, and I thought for an hour about running for the House seat. But I determined that I didn't want to become part of that system, and that if I ever did anything, I'd work on fixing the system without becoming part of it. That whole thing, Mr. Smith goes to Washington, Jimmy Stewart, if you think there's a problem, go to Washington. Well, guess what? I don't think you can go there and fix it today. It needs to be fixed by people who are working on it from the outside.
Okay. So that's a great segue. But you built a successful company. So why move from fixing businesses to trying to fix democracy? What caused you to make that jump? Because fixing democracy is not a thankful job.
I didn't even intend on fixing accounting. I was just trying to help my father out. I stumbled upon an idea to use, at that time, women didn't have flexible employment opportunities. It was peanut butter and the chocolate combining together. My dad had the scene. I just envisioned, people working from home. And I carved one accounting course in my life. I got a C in it, but I've created one of the most successful accounting businesses probably been created in the last 30 years. And, very unique and innovative approach. And there's not a lot of innovation in accounting, trust me. But I was sitting, during the COVID, and I was really not trying to this. I mean, I always had, like everybody, thinking about politics. But when the COVID hit and I was worried about losing my business and what would happen, I just kind of made a promise to myself that if I got money for the PPP, that I would pay it forward. Not only would I use the money as I intended, not a lot of people did. I used it on employees and clients. But as a thank you for it helping me survive, I would form a political committee and put some thought into it. But when I started out, I had no idea what I was doing and whether I could solve the problem. And I really didn't even think I could solve the problem when I started out. It was just a promise I made to myself.
And for the audience, the Paycheck Protection Program was a taxpayer-backed relief program designed to keep employees on the payroll during COVID-19. Many of those PPP loans were fully forgivable, meaning that they functioned as a public funding. Excuse me, they function as public funding rather than private capital. And it's been criticized because there was a lack of oversight,
Yep.
as it were, on who got the money and how the money was used. Um, so I guess the question I have, because you mentioned it and you did bring up the fact that you used it as intended, which is to pay for the employees and keep them employed. Um,
We did
do you
more than
think
that, by the way.
do you think that do you think that using those funds, or even tying your efforts to those funds, would create a stigma on you and the movement that says
Oh, I
we use those
that was
funds?
really
And
there's no tie between the money. I mean, I can only donate $5,000 a year. I mean, what you can do within a party is very restricted. I've had to do this on a shoestring. I mean, I got a fair amount of money. I feel perfectly fine with how I spent it. We frankly could not, we were not impacted to the point where we really needed to use it for employees. So we actually, a lot of our clients were devastated. We provided free services, discounted services. We work with a lot of nonprofit organizations. So we felt like could not profit from this, and that our clients did not get funding to cover contract staff. So we basically provided free services for up to 18 months. So I don't feel any stigma for anything I did. That's for sure.
Right. Well, I mean, I'm not. It's not
There's no
necessarily an
tie. Like I
ask.
said, it was
Right.
really, you said, why did I come up with this idea? That was really just, and I, like I said, never answered the question before, but that's why I came with the idea. I made a $5,000 donation in January of 2021 to get the thing started. That is a drop in my bucket. It has nothing to do with the PPP money. I wish I could put a lot more money into this. The election laws prohibit me from doing this, but to do it legally, following certain rules so that we can ultimately have the controls that we need in place so that we reclaim our power.
Okay. And I imagine that had you not gotten the PPP funds, you still would have probably pursued the rise of the Main Street Party.
I'll tell you what, I may not have started the committee, but the other thing that happened, what really got me thinking, the inspiration for the idea was that I made a joke. And I said that we do a better job picking the next American Idol than we do the next representative of Congress. And it made me think that, there really is no reason why we couldn't do this fairly. That we have the technology, we have mobile phones, that we could do this outside the system. And then when I researched what I was doing, the original way I was going to do it would have been illegal. Like if I'd done it entirely within a party structure, um, it was not legal. Like I didn't understand like that a national party actually can't pay for advertising for individual can. What they promote is get out the vote. It's like vote for all our people. So they can advertise, get out the vote, but they can't say go out and vote for Carl. There's dollar limits on that. And then that other month. So when I thought, maybe the super PAC, which I thought was evil, maybe we use a super PAC for a common good, that it basically funds the general election campaign. It does the will of the people. All other super PACs are either backing an individual or a cause. They're partisan. Ours is more or less saying, hey, no strings attached. You follow the rules. You elevate a free and equal nominee, somebody who's there to represent you. We'll back that person in the general election campaign. So my goal right now is kind of like as a person who's a new product, because I'm taking a business approach, is to find my venture capital firm. That's the super PAC. That's the person who allows us to take this to market. They do two things. They're kind of a PR firm. They could come into the districts in advance and educate the public on how this is going to work. That we need volunteers to be on local committees to officiate the process, and we need candidates and what to do if you are a candidate. Um, and then ultimately, when the contest is going, is to promote it. They don't back candidates; they back a process. And they tell people this is the way things can be better. And then when the person wins, the may have survived a field of 50, 75, 100 people, they'll back that person knowing that they went through a process. There might be I thought, maybe a check and balance between the super PAC and the district, that the district has to have a certain turnout. Like if the district doesn't show up, should the super PAC have to put their money up to back? So there'd be a carrot there to say, hey, if you want us to put the millions into this candidate, you got to hit a certain number, as we hit to the last round.
So let's talk about the nomination system itself. Like, how does it work? What is the functioning process? I know you mentioned that we do a better job voting for who our next top idol is, but how does this compare to that process?
Well, imagine if you could hear him sing. So that's what we have. And actually, you can see if you go to our mainstreetparty.org and go to the page called A Brand New Way, scroll to the bottom, the very early .1 release of this app is available. And you can see there's 2 districts set up. There's 100 candidates on each side. It kind of simulates them doing their public service announcements. But what happens is that, Carl, in advance of the contest, the local committee will determine 7 issues that are going to come before Congress, and that the candidates have to weigh on them: left, right, center, left, yes, no. And so in our version of the app, we have 5 left, center, right questions: Iran, trade, borders, stuff we should care about, and 2 local ones. So for Philadelphia, one was, if you look, one's a city issue, one's a rural issue. So we have, like, PA1 is a red district, heavily red. PA2 is heavily blue. So they're going to be our, like, mock things where the public can learn how this works. But you would go in and say, hey, of these 7 questions, these 4 matter to me. And what will happen immediately, that field will get reduced from 101 to the 4 people that match you on those issues. It could be 2, it could be 25. But in a field of 100, if you're a moderate, a pink conservative in a red district, the idea is that how do we get the temperature down? How do we get less extreme representatives? Same thing in a blue district. And it also would incentivize in a gerrymandered district, like liberals that feel like they're voiceless. They could at least push candidates that agree with them on some issues. You know what I mean? Like these moderate issues. So that now the gerrymandered people have a voice, and the people in the parties hate the other people's parties so much. I think we can leverage that, to get engagement in the contest, because they know if they participate in the primary, they have no shot. It's just they're flapping their gums. But in this, they could say, hey, maybe I'll take a baby blue representative in a heavily blue district if I'm a conservative, and vice versa. So I think in that way, this allows you to identify these candidates. You can endorse them all. We use a thing called approval voting in the early round. So, Carl, if there's 20 people that match you'd be happy with any one of them, right? So you should be able to approve them, see which make the top 20. Now we're in the top 20, say 6 made it. You want to look into them deeper? You'd probably still be happy with all 6. See if they make the top 10. Eventually you get down to a top 4, and we want to add to the contest, have a virtual town hall where the nominating committee introduces additional questions from the district. The top 4 get to introduce new content, make it more compelling, maybe use ranked choice at this point to determine the top 2. Have a final debate. The debate is the only time now where it's a choice between me or you, where it could actually get personal. It should be a relatively clean contest. No lie. It's really about you and your positions, selling yourself to the district, not tearing down the other opponent, because that doesn't work. So that, to
So,
me, is a way better system that we have now than this primary. It's a 1 round, up or down. The incumbents win 90% of the time.
I mean, perfect way to lead into my next question. It's great. It's almost like you and I are on the same wavelength here. Um, my question was specifically with regards to the primaries, right? Like we have the typical up or down primaries in most states, but if you look around the country, there's been a shift towards alternative methods. You have jungle voting, you've got ranked choice jungle, top 2, depending on what state you're in. And California is seeing what happens when they have a top 2 candidate process for their primary, because what they're looking at right now is the potential for their top 2 to be both Republicans and for
We'll
them to
see.
do the general election. So how does that differ? Like how does your system differ from those alternative options?
Yeah, and every 2 or 4 years, they think a Democrat's going to be a senator from Texas, right? um, it's what I said is you could have ranked choice voting, open primaries, get rid of Citizens United. The money still makes our system terribly unfair for the incumbent. So, I mean, these are definitely improvements to what we're doing. But what happens is that, when big legislation goes up in either a state or federal house, party whips come to them and say, hey, you want to get reelected? You vote our way. This is where the problem is system. When your vote isn't really stolen on election day, it's when they basically rob the voice that they don't put party out of country. And this is what we complain about. In our system, the party whips have no power over our reps because they have to go back through the free and equal system to win the nomination again. So if they serve party over country, they're going to pay for it in the reelection. That doesn't happen today because the donors write the check to ensure that their person wins in the primary. And until we break that cycle, we're being in the wind.
So my question to that point, right? You say donors are the ones who write the paycheck for the person that they want to win. But the voters ultimately have the say in, regardless of what system it is that we're voting in, up or down, ranked choice, all of those different types of systems. Um, why is it viewed as one of those situations where money is the problem when in reality it's might be the voter who's completely checked out and doesn't really care and votes party line instead?
No, I think that the problems go hand in hand. I mean, there's no choice. I mean, I think part of the ploy here is that the parties get you angry at the other guy. So no matter who they put up, you're okay with them. It's not the other guy. So, and then they have their person, who they want to win the primary, who's got all the money, and it's a really uphill battle unless they don't obey, and then they might get primary to the left or right, which pushes everything more extreme. And you wonder why, nothing can get done. And this is not, functional democracy. There's supposed to be necessary factions, which are more than two. I want to create four. That we create two moneyless caucuses, one pink, one baby blue. You still have the Republican Democratic parties, but at least now you have some people negotiating legislation through. And maybe we get away from these super bills, that are just everybody horse trading and stuff and throwing everything into this federal legislation. And I think this is the only way you can really break the system down, is that you have to um, have people that aren't beholden to party whips.
So what do we do about voter engagement? Because I
Well,
mean, if
make
you
it
look at
compelling. I mean, Carl, do you watch the Olympics?
no.
Oh, bad example. You probably don't watch. Hey, one of the things is to say every 2 or 4 years, people get engaged in sports they never saw. There's stories there. It's compelling. It's actually competition. Americans love competitions. The stuff we watch on TV and on our mobile devices. And I think if you make this competition compelling, people will engage. They'll know it's going to start out Carl's cousins in there. You're going to pay attention. Didn't make the first round. Why not? There's a leaderboard. There's a trending leaderboard. There's content. It's like, people play Wordle. So if we can make sure that this is not more than 5 or 10 minutes a week and you can actually get better representation, I think that's not too much to ask for. I mean, we fester over more in the news. So trade that in.
I mean, valid points. So what happens when, say, a voter goes through your system and they have a person that they really want, and that person doesn't make it through the first round or the second round, and then they're like, you know what, I'm done with this because my guy didn't make it. I mean, there's a lot of people who follow football, and if their team doesn't make it into the Super Bowl, they're done watching. So I mean,
We want them
what
to vote
happens
for
there?
values, not for people. So that you get back to the quiz, it's saying that, hey, can I advance? And if they don't have anybody they can vote for, yeah, I'd check out of that system. There's nobody I want. But I think that, the statement is that we agree on a lot more than we disagree. And right now, we don't have a system that facilitates that. And what I'm trying to show is that there are positions in the middle, that there are going to be candidates that people on both sides agree with, and they want stuff done on those things. And this is going to be a way to push those people up and give them a voice, because money wants to be thrown at the extreme positions because they're extreme positions. And this is a way to make sure that the people who have common thoughts about things actually have a way to elevate. And was saying that our currency is endorsements, not actual dollars. So the value is to get endorsements for these positions you have. Pick the popular positions and you're elevating. If your position is so unpopular that you can't find anybody, yeah. But I want to make it so that conservatives in a liberal district and liberals and conservatives can still match up on at least a few issues and get somebody nominated, even if they're gerrymandered out. All
And
they have to
that's
do is
an
agree on a couple issues out of seven.
Right, and I mean, it's an aspirational goal, and I think that there's some really heavy lifting that would need to happen,
Yeah.
especially with regards to getting the voter involved, right? Like, I think that for me, in the way that I view the system, is that the biggest problem with the system is that the voter just doesn't care anymore. And
Well,
I think that
oh, good.
no, go ahead.
Well, I'm going to take more of a business approach here, like a test market. So, most election reform says, hey, we want to do this. It's going to be statewide or national or whatever. I'm going to say, hey, we're going to pick 20 districts for 40, 10 red, 10 blue, 5 red, 5 blue. Make sure we have a budget to market. And we're going to be going into House districts. It's not an expensive race. So it's really like, how much advertising, public relations do we need to do in a population of 600,000? How much does that cost? Do it like a business. That's what they do. That's how, if you got new Pepsi and you want to do new Pepsi, you have to spend so much money to get traction. It's going to take sales. I think marketing matters, and a lot of political efforts have not been done by people who have any understanding of marketing and management. So, there may have been there have been great software products and physical products, had terrible people running those companies, ran into the ground and never got off the ground. I mean, would smartphones be so popular? Somebody other than Steve Jobs came out and took a business approach to it. So I'm going to say, hey, what can we swallow? Is it 3 and 3, 5 and 5, 10 and 10? And make sure that we can saturate that market and get the engagement that you're talking about. Could we do it nationwide? No way. But I think if the nation saw, 5 and 5 districts love this, might be easier to get 10 and 10 or 20 and 20 the next time. So the key is to make sure you're successful in your test market and that you have some wins. And I'd rather wait. I know I'm getting old, but I'd rather wait an election cycle and come in prepared to know that the product's ready and that people understand how to do it. And we've got the resources assembled. We're actually going to, win a few of these, because if we go and we get shut out, then people give up hope. We can't do that.
So, what about transparency? You talk about utilizing it or executing this process through a super PAC and utilizing endorsements as the way to move the needle. But super PACs get donations and don't necessarily always have to talk about who gave them the
Right.
donation. So,
There
how
are
do
dark
we?
super PACs and there are going
Right.
to be transparent super PACs. And you're right. If we have a dark super PAC, that would not be cool. I mean, so I think the whole thing of what we're doing is about transparency. I think we look at even the results. We're looking at this idea of having virtual polling locations and shrinking them down so that people can actually see green dots or, and verify things and open things up and make it transparent. And obviously, if we get in business with a person who's not ethical in the super PAC, that would definitely hurt the effort. But I would, look for a Ross Perot type person, somebody who's going to do this. And they may just say, hey, it's all my money. Deal with it. But in the fact that they're spending it equally, one of the lawyers said, hey, what if somebody came in and they want to dump a bunch of money in for a certain cause? I said, well, you remember the super PAC's going to spread its money out over all the districts equally. So how do they exactly influence that? I mean, if they're saying that and they've thought about it, so yeah, you're right. There's no way to really, that'd be a really stupid way for them to try to influence, because the money's just being spread across, possibly 40 campaigns. I mean, it's all watered down. So,
So, so how would they? You talked about small community driven committees. Um, who forms those? Who establishes those? How does that process get moving? And how do those committees help shape who the voters are looking at and how that process moves forward from there?
I mean, there's tons of people that are activists that work at polling, volunteer in politics. I have no doubt that if we get the engagement and we'll know the districts where we're getting downloads, that we'll find people to administer this. Kind of like people that are into swimming help the Olympic trials for swimming. There's a lot of people that like to do things that are others would see as thankless jobs, but would see, hey, I am making contribution, doing my civic duty, helping this happen. But they don't really have power. They act more like an HR department where they're, running background checks and just making sure that the data that these people they actually work where they said they worked, or were in the branch of the service that they said they were, and the basic stuff that you would expect for somebody who's going to be employed by the citizens of the United States. So that's kind of their role, is to do that and then to follow the rules of we as a party layout say to, hey, to execute this correctly, you got to do this, that, and the other, to make sure it's free and equal.
And what about security? I mean, if we're talking on the phones and we're doing virtual polling places, how do we ensure election security and ensure that the counts get counted the proper way? I mean, we already have concerns about that with our current system, but I imagine that going to a more modular mobile system would create more of that chaos and concern?
I don't know. I mean, I think people have concerns about, every system, a banking system, and, all these things. You can require audits. They require processes and procedures, do checksums. There's ways that these things are done every day in every form of industry. I work in accounting. I have a accounting firm. We have hundreds of clients. We're handling billions of dollars, trillions of accounts. People want this information. So I don't understand that I don't use Venmo, you use MGM gambling app. I mean, we're doing all this stuff and we seem to be okay with it, but all of a sudden, woo, votes. Like, why would foreign actors be that interested in our rigged elections? The same people get elected every time. We're screwing things up well enough on our own, Carl.
I mean, I would
But to your
argue that.
point, if the singer came out of American Idol, couldn't sing, yeah, people would be thinking about that. But I think the proof is in the pudding. I think people see that the better candidates move on, and that people with actual support on social media or actually had credentials and sound like they're making sense move on. I mean, shouldn't we have more suspect of the current system where you get these people get on TV and you're thinking, oh my God, where do they grow up? I mean, some of these people sound, so bad. And so yeah, question that. But I think just like everything else in life, when people see the best emerge, that will give them confidence. They're going to watch too, the trending, the polling. They're going to know the proof is in the pudding. Like I said, if you saw a really slow guy on the Olympic team, you'd wonder who he knew and paid to get there.
I mean, yeah, the your Olympic analogy is valid point. What I'm doing is I'm sitting here thinking about the process and thinking about the way that the cycle would work. And
Well, let me put it this way: if a liberal emerged from a conservative district, you think the fix is in, right? The values don't match up with the candidate. But if we're saying that these people, the voters more will say, yeah, the values are this in the district, what complaint are they having about who was nominated? I mean, and we're setting up a system where they really don't financially benefit the way they currently benefit in the system. So, I mean, we're taking a lot of the profit motive out.
So how would the system surface issues like, say, ties to APAC or ties to Israel, or ties to other foreign entities or special interest groups that might create an issue? Like a candidate can talk a good talk and play a good game, but at the end of the day, those underlying issues come up to play once they've been elected and they start to act and behave in a manner that is ulterior to the way that they talked
Yeah.
about the way that they were going to run when they were in the running process. How would this system surface that type of
I
information?
think it's two parts of that question. Like, one part is that um, all disclosures that they would need to make if they win the nomination, if they make prior to the nomination, and if they're willing to lie on and commit federal crimes, at some point you have to say that, okay, yes, you are going to have a criminal, but in the current system, some of these criminals can emerge pretty easily because they can tie themselves into money and sell themselves out. You really can't do that. Again, to use the American Idol example, how do you rig that system? They are orchestrating the production in a way that it can't be cheated. And so, in our mission, hey, if the nominating committee finds a candidate that's physical evidence of a campaign, they're out of the contest. And it's as simple as they get deplatformed. So, and so the rule, and it's also a federal crime. And once you start spending money on a campaign, you must form a federal a candidate committee. It's a law. So, the law actually works in our favor here to say that, you know what, if you're committing a federal crime, we'll figure it out because we'll see it, and you're out of the contest. You got to go run for Congress now on your own because that's not our process. So, I I when monopolies come down, it's when all of a sudden the rules that they set up to protect them start to work against them. And in that respect, that's what we're trying to do.
And to be clear, your effort is not to supplant the current primary and general election system. It's to create an alternative route by which candidates can move from primary to general election.
Correct. This is not election reform. This is um, a market pressure. You know, it's a competitive market force, and it's using a party as a nominating, as a true nominating. We currently the parties are nominating tools. It's just that they make those arrangements in the back rooms, and people that have a lot of money figure out who runs. We're more or less saying, yeah, we're gonna our back room is gonna be the whole district, and we're gonna use a computer to let them weigh in over the course of it. So from that standpoint, yes, we're creating it. Election reform has to happen. My vision is that this becomes so popular that it kind of puts the public primary out of business. It forces reform, because they won't
Mhm.
fix the system. So what do you do if you yeah, they create a system that nobody cares about as apathy. What if we create one that people love? And all of a sudden nobody shows up at the primaries. Now they have to do something.
That's a what would happen if no one shows up to the primaries? Because that's one of the things I haven't actually considered is if voters just actively ignore
No,
the
they trust
primary
our
election.
system. No,
Right.
we do everything. We then go, I see that the House seat's just the beginning, but this could be row offices, could be adapted. This will be configurable to be used at every level. So we plan that once we have this, it's that we contribute to the public domain, that it be used at state, local level for all ways to elevate, people without having money. And, in that respect, it forces either a change to the general election or we just accept that this is a better way. But this ultimately, if it is doing that, should be regulated. I lost your audio.
Oh, there we go. What do you do when the parties move against you?
Now, I don't, move against us. We're using their system. We're just using it differently. So what do you do? Get rid of super PAC or, you know, not allow a party to nominate? We're more or less saying that, hey, we're just going to, like, for us to become a national party, we have to recruit voters. That's pretty easy to do. Um, we have to have the national convention. Ours would be like a users group meeting. So there's really a way that we can adapt all this, the rules, to follow us and make us a national party, even though we would have no ideology. We would just be a process oriented party, not um, a politician oriented party.
Well, what I meant by parties moving against you is so, for example, if you were to organize around a super PACs can only take in so much money, and the larger national organizations, Republican, Democrat, have multiple super PACs that have the ability to funnel money in directions that the the party directs them to. Like it's not necessarily an illegal process, but it's not always legal either. It's kind of in that gray area. So how would the Main Street Party be able to fight against something like that?
Well, how are they using that money? I'm just curious against us.
Ads, ad spending, buying airtime, reducing the amount of time that you have to make it make your position or your name clear to the voters and allow them to see who you are and to understand where you're coming from. I mean, a lot of airtime is finite and it costs a lot of money. And if the parties can dominate that airtime and prevent you from having the ability to garner and develop that following, it's going to hurt your ability to progress with the process.
Yeah. I yeah, I think it's part of the competition. It's part of what you have to do to win. But the what our strategy is to go where they aren't typically facing competition. So we're going to Jerry. We're not trying to win a Senate race, which is really expensive. We're going to House districts where they're typically not facing competition. We hope that there's weak competition, and at the end of the day, it's like us versus them. And this, we're in a red district. We're not proposing a Democrat. We're proposing a pink conservative who's not bought by party leadership. And at what point, America, are you going to take back this country and from the rich people who are running it? I mean, it's really what's going on. And I think we can use that message against them to say that, hey, They want you to tell you to vote for their person. We just spent 5 weeks. 100,000 people just chose this person. Who do you want to vote for? The person you carefully selected or the one they just wrote, 300 checks for?
So what does success look like for you?
Well, I mean, success looks like a victory. I think because a victory proves it. A victory says that this works in gerrymandered districts. There's math behind this. There's a bell curve. My theory is that the bell curve, the representatives way off that bell curve in a gerrymandered district. It's navy and it should be pink and it's navy and red when it should be pink and maybe blue. And that if you remove money from the process, that'll return that representative the true center of the curve. That's what James Wilson said, is that the free and equal elections are the fountain of democracy. And without it, you lose your voice. And that's victory to me, that we prove that we can restore our voice. If we do it once, we can do it again and again.
So do you see that that potential win coming in the next 5 years? I mean, you said you're willing to wait until the next election cycle and when you're ready to go. But at what point do you say, okay, now's the time, and
Yeah, it would
don't allow
definitely be
perfect
in
to
two
be the
years. It would, yeah. I mean, I think if I haven't raised money in 2 years to do this, then this is a losing idea. But I can tell by, just even the track. I've done 40 podcasts in 80 days, and so there's at least 40 podcast hosts seem like. But and it's the same left, right. I can't often even tell the ideology of the host because they all have the same issue with the way we're represented. Whether they're liberal, conservative, these political podcasts are definitely usually leaning one way or the other. And but like I said, we almost never talk about it.
yeah, that's valid. I can tell you that I was a registered Republican up until last year, and I switched because of the fact that the party didn't align with my morals and values. And I can say that I've heard of,
You have no
I've
home,
talked
right?
to,
You
and
have no
I've
home.
right, I have talked to, and I know so many people in that same situation, which is why the idea of the Main Street Party is so immensely uh, provocative, evocative,
Mm.
one of those words. My thesaurus isn't working in my brain,
It's thought
but it.
provoking.
There we go. It's very thought provoking. It's one of those things that it's like, you know what, this is a great idea. Let's look into this. And I think that it has potential. I mean, you look at my district. My district is a very heavy Republican district, very, very heavy.
I'm sorry
Um,
to know. Where are you located?
I am located in eastern North Carolina, so
Okay.
the 10th, excuse me, the third congressional district of North Carolina. Our representative is a guy by the name of Greg Murphy, and he doesn't represent us at all. Um,
Okay.
but my point there is that, every time we try to get someone to run up against him, they really don't stand a chance. I think the last time a Democrat ran up against him, the Democrat in the general election got 13% of the vote, and it's like there was no competition there whatsoever.
Right.
And so I think that a system like yours would actually do well in this district, just because of the fact that we would need to find a strong competitor, and doing it the old way of Democrat and Republican is one of those. It's an iffy situation. And personally, I looked into running for office. Unfortunately, I had switched my party too late in the game to run this time around, and I plan to run next year or the next cycle. Um, all of that to say, um, my next question is, the parties tend to dominate who can and cannot run. I mean, for North Carolina, you have to have been with your party for 90 days minimum before you can go in and say, yeah, I'm ready to run. And if you aren't 90 days minimum prior to the registration day, guess what? You're out of luck until the next election cycle. So how would the Main Street Party handle those types of situations?
I have to double check North Carolina. We did research on every state to find out what the requirements were to get on as an independent. not as a party person. So the rules to get on as a Democrat or Republican are much different than getting on as an independent. And again, our plan is to run a contest where at the end of it, 100,000 people weighed in on who their nominee is going to be. And we don't feel it's going to be a huge disadvantage to be on the ballot as an independent Main Street party candidate. We feel that the district is going to know this person by the time we get to that point. For the most part, to get on House races again, I don't have to go look to see what our stuff is for North Carolina. The bar to get on the ballot in the general election for a House race is pretty low. There's a couple states that are really onerous, Georgia and Florida, I believe. I don't know. It might be North Carolina. There is another one that's really bad, but we don't need to do every state. We just need to find enough states to kind of break the system so we can fix it. And, our goal is to make sure that neither party has a majority. Once you do that, then the election of Speaker of the House would go into the main chamber. It would be a hugely moderating force. It'd be historic.
Yeah, I think North Carolina, it was a percentage of the population. You had to get signatures on a, um, uh, on a,
It's like it might be like
y-
2% of the general election
yeah.
turnout for that district. So it's not, for a House district, even if it's two, it's like 6,000 signatures. And we're thinking that we want to have 100,000 people voting in this. So we feel like if we had a few weeks after the contest to round up those 6,000, get them, whatever, we can do it. And we'll figure
Uh-huh.
out. That's why I said the logistics part of this to try to do this year would be tough. Now giving us 2 years to say, hey, which states, best shot, most participation, best organization, least cost to advertising. I think take a lot of time. You could put together a really good game plan. Right now, we just have to educate,
So what does failure look like?
not succeeding. um, I don't know. Actually, I don't think not that failure isn't an option. I think we've shown the way. And we may not, sometimes people make advances in technology, but they're not the one who gets it done, but they are people who make, you know, break their ground. I think we've broken ground. We're getting people to take a fresh look at this to really consider a possibility that maybe they never even thought of. Um, and I like to think that we've unleashed the cancer on the two-party system. And at some point, we'll close the doors.
We can only hope, right? Like that would be the ultimate success, is the elimination of the two-party system, or at least the party
Well,
system as a whole,
and the
if it were
breaking that,
me.
I mean, to me, that's why I don't think, at a minimum, there's a lot of groundwork that's been laid here, um, and just kind of thought around this whole free and equal election clause. This the discovery of James Wilson being the actual author of that, I think, only happened like 4 years ago. The guy's really only getting his due, but he felt that this was the linchpin, that making sure that the basically our representatives are accountable um, was absolutely key. And if you put it in historical perspective, 100 years prior to that, and he's from England or Scotland. Um, the English Bill of Rights made elections free. It's historic, 1869, I think, and or 1689. And then 100 years later, he moves to the U.S. and he's charged with rewriting the Pennsylvania Constitution. And instead of having a free election clause, he makes it the free and equal election clause. And then months later, he does the inaugural law lecture at University of Pennsylvania, what became the Penn Law School. He's the first law professor there, and his keynote speech was on the free and equal election clause, which he gave before President Washington, Governor Morris, the legislatures of both Pennsylvania House and U.S. Congress, and stressed that, if we did not guarantee free and equal election with vigor, that the system would basically fall apart, become poison. It should be
So
like a Second Amendment thing. These ought to be a fundamental thing that we really care about that was just buried in all the state constitutions.
I mean, it was almost like it was one of those situations. And if you look at it from the founding father perspective, they didn't want to handle elections at the federal level. They wanted it to be at the state level, which is, I believe, our saving grace currently in our current political environment.
Yeah, no, no, no.
Um, but so what, I guess the final question I have for you, um, how do how do we or how do you convince people that your efforts are not idealistic in nature and that they are realistic and that they have value beyond this is just a hope and a dream and and instead this is something serious that has potential?
It's a great final question. I mean, I do think that, um, I think we lost a lot of hope, and it's probably one of the biggest challenges we have. My mother said, you know, "I believe in you, Tom. I don't believe in us." And, that's, you know, I just think, making it tangible, you know, bringing the app to life, getting people to play with it, to see it, to understand it. I think that's the first step. Getting money behind it is the second step. And just, like I said, I'm not doing this like a political party. We put up nominees and lose. And we're just going to do this like a business and proceed down the business plan and hit the next step. And part of that is getting traction. If we never get traction, you know, we'll never get to that question about whether people believe or not. But that is that is the ultimate question: is that can people wrap their head around it?
Absolutely. Um, so tell us just one more time for the audience, where can they go to learn more about the Main Street Party, and maybe toy with the app and get a little understanding of it?
Sure. Um, America's Main Street Party, mainstreetparty.org. The best page on there is called A Brand New Way. There's a 1 minute video that kind of explains the contest in a very generic way. But if you can read through that page, and at the very bottom, you can click on and see the point 1 version of the app. It's kind of barely functional, but you can see the candidates kind of come to life and answer the quiz and see how it eliminates down, you know, those who matched you. Just if you're in a left district, you got to answer the questions. Like a conservative in a left district isn't going to have a lot of candidates, you know. So,
Mhm.
you know, but the idea is to give more choices to liberals that are blue, so they don't necessarily pick the party representative. The same thing flips around for the other districts, but we have 2 districts. You can play around with it. So but over the weeks, we'll be adding more and more functionality.
That is awesome. And once again, thank you for coming on the show. Folks, ideas are easy, systems are hard, and implementation is everything. And Tom Joseph has an amazing idea, and is in the process of establishing a pretty decent system. And it will be for the future to determine how that implementation takes place. So we'll let the audience decide where this one lands. Until next time, I'm Carl, and this is Hard Questions.